Hello and welcome. I am Megan. I am a photographer and watercolor artist with chronic health challenges, POTS, and wrist strength issues. I have done a lot of watercolor painting in bed. Today I wanted to walk you through getting set up to paint in bed. Paint, paper, brushes, water, how to not spill the water. I have also done other videos of like kits and things that I already have set up. So you can check those videos out as well. I am not a doctor. This is the bag I showed you last year. I have shoved a few things in it. So, let's start with water. This is the water container that I use when I paint in bed. I used to use, right here, this one. This is 2 ounces, and this one's 4 ounces. And for the longest time, I just used this one. It's very small. You can fit your little brush down in there, and this can fit inside of like most of the little bags that you might want to try. I have this bag, which I fit this into. You can find that video on my channel, or I'll link it below for you. Currently, I have these new markers in it. So if you had some marker paper, the Sophie's Art Mixed Media, the turtle paper, would work really well for markers. And then you could like markers. Or you could do a fountain pen. So you could do some sketching and some drawing in bed. That's probably the easiest, that doesn't require the water, thing to do if you are in bed feeling bad from health stuff. This works really well with wrist strength issues for me because of the chunky barrel and then the heartbeat nib that's in here. The ink flows out really smoothly from this one. I've got Detrimentus Artist Brown in there currently. And my beautiful yellow pen. So you can just have a pen and a notebook and do some sketching or something. I can show you my notebook. Look at my notebook. This is a traveler's notebook. This book is Wanderings paper, and this one's Midori paper. I've actually been able to get Wanderings to take... Oh, that's fun. I haven't looked at this in a while. This is, I think it's Blue Mercy Bluish from Roaring Klingner, but it's like one of those bright turquoises that's wettable. I have a video all about fountain pens for watercolor artists if you want to learn more about like wettable versus not wettable watercolor ink. Watercolor ink. My brain is so stuck on watercolor because that's what I was going to show you today, but I thought, well, there are other things you can do in bed. Let me show you this real quick. But you can see it actually handles the see, it's not really that buckly, and it didn't do any pilling. And that's my palette that I swatched out on the Wanderings paper. But anyway, this is the little one. I'll link in the description for you, and you can have that, and you can have your little pen, and then you can just do some sketching or something if you're in bed, or, you know, in the car waiting for the doctor, or wherever you are. Markers. I haven't used these very much there for a sketching class. If you're interested in sketching and you have wrist strength issues like I do, what is her name? Mallory Jane has a sketching course which I've just started doing with my mom, and she talked about working from your shoulder instead of from your wrist and how that helps you get a straight line. But I'm thinking, oh, this also works for wrist strength issues. And then instead of doing the sketching where she like fills in little sections with pencil and then you do like a ton of shading and stuff, which is really hard on my wrist, she's like, use markers. Either these for like color so that we can see the perspective, or there was also these ones, which I hope you're not getting too much glare off of that. Oh, I almost dropped that. You see how they're like different, and it's like a gradient. So you can do shading on your pencil and not have your wrist hurt from actually doing the pressure with an actual pencil. You can just do a couple of lines and then with a marker, and it fills it in. So I haven't finished her course yet, but I'm sure her channel also has stuff. She has a YouTube channel, so you could check that out. So that's markers and pencils and fountain pens. you can use for painting in bed. Now we can go back to talking about watercolor. But those are new things to me to be able to do. Because I wasn't even able to do like a page of handwriting without my wrist aching for like a week. Like you go, you have to sign your name on a document or something, and then my wrist would like hurt for 3 days. I'd be sitting there like, I do have a wrist brace somewhere around here. That's really helpful when you were learning and you're taking a class. I'll put that in the link in the description as well. So, water. Woo. These are the water containers I use, and I have packed this in my suitcase and then car traveled, and it didn't leak. I used to use, there's like this medicine, it's like a bunch of vegetables and stuff, and it's like dehydrated in little capsules, and that was in a container. It's called Juice Plus, and I used to use that. It's like this little plastic container, so like you could use, probably my calcium tablets would have also been a good bottle, because they're like plastic bottles. I don't think would leak, and that's what I started with. So you could use something like that. You don't want to use dishes from your cabinet unless you're going to dedicate it to paint, because once it's been used for paint, it should go back into circulation to be, drink out of. So water, and then related to water would be a cloth. I used paper towels, kitchen towel, or you can use like an old washcloth. I have a really pretty old washcloth. One of the most fun things, like if you're going to start painting, did I start filming? Yes. One of the most fun things when you like start painting, when I started painting, was like I had this white washcloth. It's got, because I was drying my brush off on the white washcloth, it's got all these paint splotches all over it. It's the prettiest thing. I know it's kind of dingy looking, but it's really pretty, and it's like from my first month of painting. This is a shop cloth, and we rinsed it out really well, let it dry, and then used it because it had something weird on it that made my fingers feel bad, like maybe there was a chemical or something on it, but it's fine now. My 3/4 flat, which also has a good chunky handle, so like the same thing I showed you with the pens. It's really important that the chunkiest handle. The handle of the brush is chunky, so I would go with at least a 1/2 inch flat or a 3/4 inch flat for my wrist. I really love this brush, but I haven't painted with it a lot recently because I've been using my travel flat brush. But look at this. This is a toothbrush holder that I found in a drawer that I've had for like 8 million years. And it like holds my travel brush. And the bristles are not out. Ugh. And the bristles are not pushed up against the thing because it's kind of semi-transparent. I can kind of see. And I'm going to store it vertically so it won't damage the bristles. And it's got a little air hole. The brush isn't wet anymore anyway. But that's cool. You could find something like that. I can't link to it. I've had it for like forever. Travel brushes, but you can just get a brush roll or get some kind of a unique solution like that and paint with what you have in bed. This is my travel brush. I was like, why is it wet? Oh, right. Painting. Look at this. It turns out that this is like the only travel brush that I can use because the handle is chunky enough. The brush head is a bit smaller than that one, but if I'm careful to have big broad strokes, then I'm able to do this. Sometimes you will see on my channel that the painting, like in the background when I'm talking about something, I'm doing all this like tiny detail work. I should have been paying more attention to the painting, and that's not good for your wrist to do all this little repetitive movements. No, I'm gonna make my wrist hurt demonstrating. Anyway, it's synthetic squirrel, which means it's very absorbent. So even though it looks really small, it actually holds a whole lot of water. One of the other pieces that you want to pay attention to is the mouth size of your water container in proportion to like your paintbrush. Because there was a brush I was trying to use a while ago and it wouldn't fit into the container. And I have some quills. I was rinsing you know what a quill is? Let me show you. I have a travel quill, but the one I was using was not a travel one. It was like a giant version of a quill. This is a quill, So instead of a round, which is kind of created the same as this has like this clear plastic around here. So it's got so many more bristles in here. So you don't want to remove this part. And that means the belly of the brush is much bigger. Well, I have giant versions of this that are like this big. And this is so pretty. What was I saying? And I would paint sitting in the backyard with the giant quill on this little water container trying to learn color theory, and it was really hard to rinse. The quill absorbed like most of the water that was in here. So that's one of the other pieces. Like, we will get to paper, and when we talk about paper, you want to think about the size of your paper in comparison to your brush size, but also your water container in proportion to like your brush size, and also like what kind of paints are you using, because if you're using, we'll get to paint, honey-based paints, or paints that are like really highly pigmented, and then you're rinsing them off in a tiny water container, your water's going to get really dirty really quickly. But if you're painting landscapes, then that's probably fine. You just might end up with kind of more muddy looking yellow, but you can still continue painting even with dirty water. The problem is then you might run out of water if you have a giant quill. So there's that. Quill works so much better for me with wrist strength issues than a round. I'm not actually grabbing the bristles and pulling on them, just so you know, because like that'd be bad for the brush. I'm just touching it. A quill works so much better for wrist strength issues than like a round does, because it's actually a whole lot bigger than it looks, because there's so many bristles packed in here because of the way that this is designed. So quills work much better for me with wrist strength issues and flats. And I don't know what it is about a flat. I think it must be the angle of how I hold the thing, but somehow a flat just worked so much better when I was beginning painting than a round did. I even tried like a giant round. This has like a hair sticking out. Oh, come on. Who put the lid on this? Me. There's a hair sticking out, so I'm going to wet it so that it will close back up. Let me show you before we move on to paper. Did I get it? Yeah. There's a hole in here so it can breathe. It'll be fine. Oh, let me show you how I go about opening and closing all of the different pieces. I hope that's not blinding you. But you can see I've got this. I almost turned this upside down with it open. You can see I have my hand like this, and I'm holding my little palette. The angle that I'm sitting at in comparison to the water container is making it hard to open this. Normally I don't have a hard time opening this. So I can get the paper all set up and situated here, and then the pinky under here is holding my brush, and then I can paint, pick up some paint, rinse the brush, and then the most important thing is that you close the water first. There you go. That's kind of the strategy for that. Let's talk paper. When you're feeling bad from health stuff, it's really helpful to have paint that you are cool with blobbing paint all over. So the Sophie's Art, that's this one. So you can see this is what that paper is like. It's watercolor paper. And I also really like this one, but for some reason it's precious. Like, because in my first month of painting, I got in my head that it's precious. This one has more of a texture. It's also non-cotton, but this one has more sizing. So the paint's gonna like take off and whoosh and do more fun things on this. This one's going to work better for things like pencils and crayons because it's really smooth. Don't worry, I'm just stacking everything back up in a precarious pile. Ugh. Everything's fine. I have also got a stack of little books here that I really like, if I can reach them. So I have a little 3x5 book. This one's Tumarta. Tumarta comes in like half and half cotton and cellulose, or non-cotton, and fully cotton, and I find it much easier to paint than the one that's like totally cotton. But you can see it's got a bit of texture to the paper too. I've done a video comparing what was it? The Potentate and the Paul Rubens, which I have right here. But also, I really love the Tumarta. Since making that video, I've decided that like Tumarta is my favorite. Like the 100% cotton little Tumarta. This one's the Potentate, and yeah, look, I finished it all off. So you can check that video out for more comparisons of like the paper. But they all work really well. I forgot what I was going to tell you about that, but it's really nice to have a little book for painting in bed. And this one's the Paul Rubens one. Paul Rubens is more smooth paper than some of these other ones. And then I think the Tumarta one has more of a texture to it. So that's a series of little books. And I think little books like that work really well with a small travel brush and when you're feeling bad from health stuff, because you're just working on a small page about this size and you can go from one side of the page to the other and do like, now my sky is done, versus having a much larger sheet of paper is going to be a lot more work to get from one side to the other. And I don't paint very detailed because of wrist challenges, so I somehow like the smaller paintings that I do better. They feel like they have more cohesion and detail to them. I also really like focusing on the composition. Oh, I'm sitting on a book. I haven't painted in this yet. That's fun. So there's those are 3x5. There's also this size, which is 5x5. And I like this size. This one is Potentate. I thought it was a Tumarta. It paints really well. And it's got some texture to it. You can see it handled the granulation in those watercolors really well. I've been having fun painting in this one. Probably because the front cover's blue. No, but I love the paper that's in there. They also make slightly larger sizes of those different brands, but those are really good quality papers. You could also get a pad of Fabriano and you can tear pages out. Generally speaking, if I'm painting in bed, I don't want to be working with loose pages. I like books because I can keep it all together in one thing. But if you like working with loose pages, then the Fabriano pad is a really nice one. The Paul Rubens also has like a block, but I have really hard time getting blocks open with wrist strength issues because you have to like work around the edge of the like thing and tear the page off. And paint. So I showed you this. This is a little mini skater palette I got on Amazon, and it holds 6 full pans. I've also put 3 full pans in here. I just said you got the words mixed up. These are half pans. And I stuck magnets on the bottom of them so that they stick, because this is a magnetic little tin. And that way I can move paints around. So you could have like a couple of these, I think it came in a set, and then have multiple color palettes open. Or there's a slightly larger, this is a medium. This is a pretty average size palette that you'll find. It's kind of big for travel stuff, but it works well for painting in bed. And I would set this in my lap and then paint out of it. Just pick the paint up, put it directly on the paper. Colors, I'm going to mention for a second. You can probably paint with honey, no problem, in bed, but if you're having a hard time with your paint, like you're picking up too much paint, then you could go with something that's non-honey. So honey-based would be Sennelier or M. Graham or Rosa. Non-honey-based paints would be things like Da Vinci and American Journey. I think Schminke. I can't remember if Van Gogh is or isn't honey, but it picks up more like a non-honey based color, and then Core is like neither of those, but it picks up well onto the brush. If you're having a hard time getting the paint up onto your brush, then you want to probably go with something that is honey based. I have a mixture of some of one and some of the other. You kind of learn over time what each paint wants. So like this one is going to pick up a lot of paint onto the brush, so I have to be careful to not pick up too much of it, versus this one's going to want some water and be activated first, and then I can pick up the color. And as I paint with it, it'll become easier to pick up onto the brush. And you'll learn that through practice. But this is pouring tube paint. You can also buy like Rosa watercolors. They're going to come like dried down in the pans already, so you can just stick the pans in there, or they will come in a palette. Or you can get a Core palette. This one works really well for painting in bed. I added some colors here, so it came with these dried down ones, and then I added some colors. And those pick up really well onto the brush, but they aren't going to become a mess if you're like traveling with them. Honey-based paints tend to become a mess if you're going to travel with them. The Core are not honey-based, but they pick up well onto the brush as if they were honey-based. Oh, colors. That's what I was saying. Something that's like a convenience green and a convenience like brown, yellow ochre, those kinds of things are going to make painting much easier if you have wrist strength issues, because otherwise you're going to be mixing all of your colors and you're going to be spending your wrist action on mixing up the paint when you could be just taking a green and putting it on the paper, and that saves you steps, which saves your wrist from hurting over time and allows you to paint more. This I showed you at the beginning is my adorable little bag. I did a video on that. I also did a video on this little bag and what fits in that for painting in bed. I think I had one on a gray bag as well. It was like a vertical gray bag. Cool. Well, I hope that was all really helpful, that you will have fun painting in bed. You could also use something like a water brush. Pentel has a good one that doesn't leak. Pretty much all the other ones leak. I have wrist strength issues, so I find those really hard to use. But you could do that. You could also use something like watercolor pencils. I got watercolor crayons here, and those I can't use as much because it does take more work to put them on the page, but once you get them on the page, you can use water to wet them down, and that is so much easier than blending without water. I don't even know how anybody does that. My wrist couldn't do that. And then here's a pencil. I use the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle ones because they're the softest ones I have found. They lay down a lot of color, so I actually can use them. And then those other ones are Neocolor 2 from Caran d'Ache. They're the 2 is the one that's water soluble. Probably should have stuck those up front with the pens and stuff section, but anyway. I would love to know what you do. What do you do when you want to paint in bed? What supplies are your like favorite things? I always end up painting landscapes and mountains and things. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.